Whip. Joining me to go in depth, some would say perhaps into the weeds about this, is our good friend, Republican strategist Ford O'Connell. Ford, thanks for being with us again this morning, Skyping in from the nation's capital.
Well, I'm always glad to be with you, particularly on a Friday, JD.
Excellent. Well, we're glad to have you here. Let's talk about Kevin McCarthy. He is someone who has the reputation of a political vunderkind out of the Bakersfield area of California, succeeding Bill Thomas, who had been the Ways and Means chairman. And Kevin had to fight back against criticism outside the Congress that, well, he's really not conservative enough, and his stance on illegal immigration amounts to amnesty. Let's take a listen to how Kevin McCarthy, the new majority leader, responded when asked about grassroots Republicans potentially being frustrated at his ascension to majority leader. Listen.
They elected a guy who is a grandson of a cattle rancher, the son of a firefighter. Only in America do you get that opportunity. They elected a guy that's only grown up through the grassroots.
So he's saying, hey, look, I'm a grassroots guy, but you can appreciate the disconnect and the frustration that some conservatives feel. It's not that they're anti-Kevin McCarthy. They're just wondering, is Washington listening and the conservative party listening to the conservative base?
Well, I think you really hit the nail on the head here. What Kevin McCarthy was trying to say is, hey, guys, I'm one of you. Trust me, I'm going to get this job done. But really, let's be honest here, JD. The next 5 months for Kevin McCarthy is really seen as a tryout period because we don't know what's going to happen in the midterm elections. Do the Republicans take the Senate? If they take the Senate, you know, he probably won't be challenged when we get to the next round of elections. But as of right now, he has to consolidate people's confidence in him, and that's really where he's trying to head right now.
All right, now this is where it gets fun. We've had all the concentration on the majority leader's race, and I tell you what, before we get to the fun on the whip, Raul Labrador stepping forward from Idaho as, I don't want to say the token conservative, but just to say, look, there needs to be an alternative to Kevin McCarthy. Does this have an impact at home for either of these two, especially for Congressman Labrador back in Idaho?
You know, I don't think it really does because really most people don't know how the leadership works. What they do want to see, though, is the Republican Party as a whole put forth, you know, fiscal conservative bills and legislation that are actually going to improve Americans' lives. At the end of the day, this is about the leadership as a whole. With respect to back home for Kevin McCarthy, you did say something there that's true. This is an agricultural district. We both know the two things that they're concerned about. One is the Farm Bill, and the second is illegal immigration. And right now, Kevin McCarthy's going to have to walk a fine line between his district and the national interest of the Republican Party. So we're going to see. I mean, this has more of an impact back home for Kevin McCarthy than it does Raul Labrador.
All right, we'll see what happens out in that California ag district for Kevin McCarthy. Let's talk now about the whip race. When you and I got together earlier this week, it really, to use your term, became inside baseball, where they were looking beyond the first ballot. Steve Scalise of Louisiana taking on the chief deputy whip, Peter Roskam of Illinois, with a Hoosier thrown in for good measure in that race. So a three-way race. Steve Scalise said, make me your second choice. Is that the way this went down as they chose the next majority whip?
No, you want to know what Steve Scalise really did, and it's something he learned in the Louisiana state legislature. Hustle, timing, and organization. This guy pounded the pavement, JD. I was up on Capitol Hill last night after the elections, and I'm going to tell you something. It was quite clear who did their homework, who checked off each member twice, who made those phone calls, who tried to allay any concerns. Steve Scalise said, I want to win this on the first ballot. And I'm going to tell you something. It's a testament to probably, hopefully, how he's going to work his whip in terms of corralling votes. What I saw last night from Steve Scalise was impressive, and he learned how to build up chits and execute on cashing them in, and I tip my hat to him.
And perhaps, Ford, at this point in time, it's important to pause for the non-political junkies and maybe a few people who wonder about the term whip. When you hear that, it's not S&M or the deal is it's somebody who counts the votes as different bills that the party sponsors, as that legislation comes to the floor, it's to get an idea of where the membership is and where the votes are, and therefore to whip up to see where the different members are standing. So what you're telling me is that Steve Scalise, in running for whip, put together a very effective whip organization to count the votes and deliver this job unto himself.
Well, that's exactly right. And the skills that he used to become the next whip is exactly what you want in terms of with the whip. Once the majority leader and the speaker set the agenda, this is the person whose sole job is to go to make sure that you can deliver the majority votes for the bill. And the way he went about doing this is exactly the way that a whip's going to have to do it when legislation's on the floor. And back to Kevin McCarthy, this was the concern with Kevin McCarthy was whip. He had a lot of high-profile, embarrassing moments where he promised to deliver votes, particularly on the Farm Bill, and he flopped. I think Steve Scalise is going to have a better understanding of the pulse, particularly the conservative side of the party.
Well, let's take a listen to Steve Scalise. In the wake of his victory, here's what he had to say when the new leadership team came out to meet the press yesterday.
We've got solid conservative solutions that are going to solve the problems facing our country.
All right, so he's optimistic about solid conservative leadership and problem solving. Just an aside, Ford, I mentioned this the other day, but it was my impression during my days in Congress that the Louisiana delegation to the House, regardless of partisan label, campaigning in the crib. What is it about Louisiana and the kind of folks who come out of there who seem to be born with these innate political skills?
You know, I don't know what it is, but it must be something in the water in Lake Pontchartrain, to be perfectly honest with you. These folks are nimble. They know how to work the grassroots, and they also know how to basically go up to a legislature, whether it's in Louisiana or in Washington, and really understand what it takes to handshake, press the flesh, and deliver. I don't know what it is, but it's something that they have that very few other people have. You know, going back in time, everyone from Louisiana who's made it on the national scene has been very good at this.
And let me segue using the theme of Louisiana politicians away from the House leadership race that a few Americans really focus on the way we do, to something everybody will be focused on in 2016, and that is the presidency. Bobby Jindal, the governor of Louisiana, I served with him in the House of Representatives as he spent a couple of terms there before becoming governor of Louisiana. Jindal is mentioned time and again as someone who is very capable, as someone who is very attractive. Is Bobby Jindal perhaps one of the dark horses in a prospective presidential run in 2016?
I think that Bobby Jindal is much more likely to be on the vice presidential shortlist. The thing with Bobby is he's not very popular back home, and he's very different than a lot of the other Louisiana politicians. Yes, he's very good at being able to make those relationships, but he's a little wonky and a little bit too policy in depth for I think a national electorate. And he's got great ideas. He's a Rhodes Scholar, brilliant guy. I've spoken with him many times, but sometimes when it comes to actually explaining in a 10-second soundbite the overarching theme of a lot of legislation, that's where Bobby falls short, particularly on the stump.
So, yeah, the real challenge, and we should point this out from Bobby Jindal's political resume, before the age of 30, he stepped in Louisiana really to run Medicare, Medicaid, to deal with health care policy with it. So the key for him is when people ask what time it is, he's got to tell them what time it is and not how to build the watch.
You're exactly right. I mean, Bobby Jindal is an incredible workhorse. It's not just being a workhorse. Sometimes you've got to be a show horse, and you have to be very affable to people, regardless.
Everyday language. It's a challenge for many of us. Ford, thanks for bridging that gap between inside baseball in the Republican conference to bring it back to us with crystal clarity. We appreciate your insights as always from Washington.
Much appreciated, JD. Talk next week, my friend.
Look forward to it, Ford. Well, you heard Ford's take as a political consultant. As a political observer, what's your take? Why don't you tweet us your thoughts about the new Republican leadership at Newsmax TV, hashtag America's Forum. You've also got email, connect@newsmaxtv.com. And let's not forget Facebook. Our faces reappear following the break here on America's Forum.